Good evening. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Dr. Foley, roll call.
Members of the board, please let the record show that all members are present.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and have a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. I move that we approve our agenda with a modification with the removal of item 3.1, board comments.
Second.
Any questions or comments regarding the agenda? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. The next item on our agenda is the request to speak. We value input from our constituents. This time has been set aside for anyone from the audience who wishes to address the board. Please remember, this is not an appropriate venue to evaluate, discuss, or criticize district personnel. Policy KEB provides a process for complaints about personnel. Speakers should be aware that false statements about individuals may result in civil liability. Members of the board may not discuss items that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431.01H, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling the matter for further consideration and a decision at a later date. Please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. I will try and pronounce names properly, and please forgive me if I do not. We will start with Jen Zauer.
Thank you for allowing the opportunity for the public to speak and for the countless hours you've spent the last week trying to make another challenging decision. I've had the chance to review the presentation proposal that will be shared tonight for amending the mask policy to continue to require masks to be worn indoors for the remainder of the school year. Thank you for doing the right thing for all students and staff in HUSD schools. As I shared in my email to you last week, wearing masks is not only the #1 recommended mitigation strategy from the CDC for schools, it is also what every parent sitting in this very room agreed to when they signed their child up for in-person schooling this year. In addition, it allows for all children who are currently attending school in person to be able to finish the school year and participate in the activities they were looking forward to in the safest manner possible. I believe your proposal to amend and adopt a face mask policy that would still require masks to be worn indoors keeps the health and safety of the students and staff at the center of your decision. I want to also encourage you to not be premature in making a decision tonight about what will happen beginning on June 1st. In the presentation posted for tonight, you use the current CDC guidelines as support for why you are continuing to require coverings indoor for the remainder of this year. We do not know what CDC guidelines and recommendations will be come July. If these guidelines inform your decisions about safety today, then they should still inform your decisions regarding safety in July. We cannot just pick a date and say, well, we gave it our all, that's it, we're done. If you're committed to the health and safety of all in HUSD, not just for the rest of this school year, then you owe it to the community to use the CDC guidelines as the standard for deciding when it is safe to completely remove the requirement of face masks for summer school and next year. Therefore, I'm asking you not to suspend the policy as of June 1st, but rather set a meeting to review the plan this summer with the most current guidance from the CDC. We are all tired from the pandemic. Nobody can deny what a truly exhausting year it's been. But this pandemic is not over. We are getting closer to everyone who chooses to be protected being able to do so. However, until then, we have to be willing to work together as a community to keep everyone as safe as possible. Don't give up what has been working and what has allowed our children the opportunity to learn in person this year. Please continue to require masks for the remainder of this year and then review this summer where things are at for next year. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will go on to Janae McLean.
Hello. I feel underprepared after that last. I think she did amazing. I am in complete agreement with her as to everything that she said as far as keeping the masks. I feel masks are very important for not only solidarity and showing the rest of the community who has not yet had COVID that we are still supporting those people who are waiting to get their vaccination. As of today, I saw that only 27% of Arizonians have received both COVID vaccinations. We're looking at about 40% who have gotten one dose. It's also my understanding that some people are only getting one dose and not actually doing the second dose. For myself, I am a dental hygienist, which means that I am not able to socially distance when I do my job. I am not able to have somebody around me wearing a mask. I did end up with COVID. I got concerned that when I got COVID, it was from a patient, and how many patients did I possibly infect because I'm so close in working conditions with these people. However, I found out that I got COVID from a coworker when I was unmasked at lunch, not wearing proper PPE. I could not imagine doing my job without the proper PPE that I use every single day. The last pandemic that we had is actually what brought about a lot of the PPE that I wear on a daily basis. Pandemic being HIV/AIDS. So while this is temporary for the rest of the public, this is something that is long-term for healthcare professionals and something that we need to stick together with as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next speaker, Stacy Finter.
Thank you guys for letting me speak. Just wanted to let you know I removed my 2nd and 5th grader from Chaparral right before school started because I did not want to send my children to school masked because of their physical and mental health. They attend Prenda School with 9 of their other friends, and they are unmasked and they thrive. As you know, there's many harmful effects, but I won't go into that. My 2nd grader, though, has a speech issue, and there is no way that he nor others can correct that with a masked teacher and friends. The physical effects will linger for many years to come. I decided to send my 7th grader to Cooley since he is in all accelerated classes and needs a challenge. I was told that they would be given mask breaks and had someone from the district meet with him and tell him what his rights were and how to take mask breaks. He was never allowed these breaks, starting the following day. The teachers refused to allow him to even take a drink in the classroom. They wouldn't allow him to go to the back of the class either. He tried out for cross country and was the fastest kid on the team, but was told that he'd have to fully wear a mask over his nose in order to participate. And I want to know who can run 6 miles with a mask on, because that's not okay. He did the same thing for soccer and was told to sprint and do suicides for 2 hours, fully masked with the mask over his nose and no breaks from it. The coaches just told him that it's building their stamina. That's not the truth. My son has more stamina than almost any kid out there. He walks the stairs in the hot halls with a crazy heavy backpack, and he can't remove his mask. At lunchtime, he sits alone. Principal refuses to allow him to sit at his friend table since he is the 7th child to arrive from his class. One day, he was forced to sit outside alone. He had a bird poop on him and in his food, so he left his poopy food and continued to clean himself up in the bathroom for the remainder of the lunch period. He came home depressed, and he still hasn't forgotten about it. He is picked on daily now, knowing that he's the 7th child to arrive at that table, and almost daily sits alone. My 9th grader started at Williamsfield this year. She suffers now from anxiety and ADHD, which was diagnosed a few months ago. She also met with the district person to show her how to take mask breaks. She too was never given the option after that day. She can't breathe when walking up the stairs with her gear and face mask. She then hyperventilates and panics and has a full-on panic attack at times. She frequently eats lunch in the bathroom or outside by herself, and she can't find smiling faces and people she knows to sit with. She's had multiple respiratory illnesses this year from the masking, and her anxiety is at an all-time high, so much that the doctor has put her on medication to be able to handle going to school. She can't find smiling faces of acceptance. She's learning Spanish and can't see the teacher's face properly, so they are instructed to use online platforms for their learning. Governor Ducey has removed the mask mandate for a reason, and the teachers have been vaccinated if they choose to, and also parents. The children are not suffering from COVID, and it seems to not be spreading in our community. And I ask that you understand that it is a parent's right to choose, what is for the best for their children. So I hope that you guys are able to understand the long-term effects also on the kids, and they need to be free and they need to be happy. And if their parents choose for them to be masked, that is their choice. So,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
All right, our next speaker, Andrea Nielsen.
Thank you, board and admin, for all you've done this year. I'm also very grateful for the teachers in our district and all that they've done. It's been a really hard year for all of us. Our child's pulmonologist was in the ICU in July with COVID. His wife is also his nurse practitioner, and 2 weeks after her husband got out of the hospital, we had a telehealth visit with them for my child's asthma. We were given a mask exemption, so he wouldn't have to wear a mask. She said that it did not increase the risk for COVID issues with asthmatics, and that the mask could increase his risk. So because Higley did not provide for any mask exemptions, we had to move him to a different school. We have another child who's in kindergarten, and we will be moving her as well if we aren't able to get the things that we need from Higley. So I want to know for each of you, when does the fear of potential illness outweigh actual mental and physical illness or lack of connection in our kids? What are the unintended consequences of keeping masks on our children for the next 4 weeks? Some of the kids who were online got to see their teachers' faces. They saw their friends' faces. They got to connect with them in different ways that our children who've been in school all year have not. My kindergartner has not really seen her teacher's face. She adores her and loves her and never wants to leave kindergarten because she loves her so much. At the after-school pickup, I've seen kids with masks with black spots on them. They've been stepped on, they've been chewed on, they've been dropped, they've been touched all over. There's other things going into our children's bodies that's not COVID. I'm concerned with what they're breathing in with the masks on. My children have suffered headaches, difficulty breathing, dizziness, and more from wearing masks all day, all year. They refuse to go to the nurse to get Tylenol because they're going to get sent home for 10 days. My overall happy, compliant kindergartner who loves school more than anything has had to take mornings or entire days off from school because the mask is just too much that day. Looking back at the August 25th board meeting, I found some comments from parents and teachers who were concerned about going in person. So they wanted to follow the data and the science on it. A teacher said if we look at 2 to 3 weeks of data, we will know for sure if their model is protecting students and staff. So that was in relation to getting back into school. They wanted to see what other schools were doing. Another was a parent, says science matters, and if we will listen to what it says, a few more weeks will let us see what happens in the other districts. It is our job as adults to make sure it is safe for our kids, teachers, and staff. Many charter schools in the area have not been enforcing masking for weeks. My son has not had to wear a mask all year. They are doing better than schools with 0 mask exemptions. These schools do not have credit recovery courses lined up for the summer or for the next quarter because their kids are thriving. My son is thriving at a different school. My kids who are in Higley Unified are struggling, and they are not kids who typically struggle. Do the requests made in August 26 from the other parents and teachers follow the science and the data? Do they not apply today? My kids' challenges from the unintended consequences of the policies in place now are too personal to share in this setting. Who will protect our kids from the unintended consequences of mask wearing? What unintended consequences have your children faced? If you refuse to unmask all of our kids, please consider unmasking our youngest kids. They are the least at risk. They are the least at risk of spreading.
Thank
And
you.
I would love to have the teachers. Thank you so much.
All right. Our next speaker, Heather Mays.
I start my words with you this evening with comments from my daughter, who's a 7th grader at Cooley Middle School. I asked her what she thinks about wearing masks at school, and these are her words. First of all, the mask mandate has been lifted for all the schools in Arizona by the governor. I see why people might want to still wear masks, but if they are uncomfortable not wearing them, they should have the choice to do online school or continue to wear them at school. Also, if the teachers are vaccinated, why are they still required to wear masks? Questions which I did not answer to her at the time. She says, if our parents don't feel the need to make us wear masks, then why should the school? They should let students have the option to wear them if they want to, but not be required to wear them. Another student also enrolled at Cooley says, masks make it hard to focus and hard to breathe. It's hard to understand other people. Some personal comments from a senior who is attending Williamsfield High School says, masks have personally made me feel like I'm hiding behind something. I got anxiety from being locked in my house for so long, and then I had to try and show up for school already uncomfortable. I wore my mask and still got COVID, even though I was being lectured every day to wear a mask, so I didn't get it. I think it's awful how if anyone feels insecure, they can just hide behind a mask. It's really affecting kids' mental health. These thoughts and feelings are straight from our students in our district. They should be allowed a voice in something that directly affects their daily lives. I've personally heard other kids saying things like, I like wearing a mask, I don't have to talk to people as much, and I like that I can hide behind my mask. These masks are not only causing potential physical harm, but the mental and emotional harm they are causing for our children is detrimental. Depression is thriving behind these masks, and we cannot let that continue. I ask that you consider making mask wearing an option and not a requirement. This decision that affects our children's physical, mental, and emotional safety can and should be left to the individuals and their parents. Lastly, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to share these comments, and also thank you and our teachers for the time and effort that you all put forward on behalf of our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jen Larson.
Hello, thank you for allowing us to be here, and thank you for holding this meeting, especially to talk about masks and giving us so much time to express our concerns. I've tried so many times over the last year to put myself in your shoes. I know that none of you actually signed up for this part of being on the board. It's a little surprising, I'm sure, what you're having to deal with, but I feel, I've often thought that it probably feels like you're in a no-win situation. For every single parent telling you that their child will be harmed by removing masks, there is a child that will be harmed by keeping the mask mandate. In reality, there are countless arguments as to why we should or should not wear masks. I'm sure you felt like it's quite the tug of war. It seems in the past year we have tended to err on the side of catering to those that prefer masks. We have somehow disregarded the concerns of those that are negatively impacted by wearing them, and there are many negative impacts, most of which we don't even know, because we've never done this as a society. This has never been required of K through 12 children or society in general. Anxiety, claustrophobia, any kind of breathing or respiratory issues, psychological harm, speech impediments, hearing problems are a few. There's harm to social connections, misunderstandings in tone and delivery and instructions, and a lack of human contact. There is countless research stating what a simple smile can do for someone that is having a hard day. So what do? I can only see one option, and that is choice. Everyone has a choice. It always has been the only option. There are countless ways we can protect ourselves at this point. There are vaccinations, there's online school, there's grocery pickup, there's restaurant delivery, and on we go. We've created a very safe society if you have concerns about COVID. No one is negating those, but we all should be able to choose for ourselves what we need to do. In addition, experts have actually altered their original view that mask wearing only protects others. According to the CDC, it does protect the wearer. You can continue to wear a mask, even if the mask mandate is lifted, if you feel it necessary. If someone has concerns with how much protection that one mask gives, they're welcome to wear two. They can do online school. They have their options, but when we continue to keep these mask mandates, we take the choice away from those of us that no longer think that this is necessary. We can't continue to pretend that there's only one solution to a very complex problem. Every time you choose to enforce masks and cater to one group of children, you are in fact harming a different but equally important group of children. Choice is the only answer. I've heard from kids and their perspective I've heard from parents that their perspective is that because they had returned to school thinking that we were going to be wearing masks, that we should continue through the end of the year. I sent my children to school this year knowing that once the mask mandates would be lifted, that I would have a choice. And this last couple of weeks does matter. I have very big events for my children like graduation, dance concerts. These things should not be impacted just because it's easier to say, let's just finish out the year. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sarah Lunder.
Hi, members of the board. My name is Sarah Lunder, and I have a 6-year-old boy who should have started kindergarten at Cortina this year, and an 8-year-old second grader at Cortina Elementary. I had so much I wanted to say tonight, but 3 minutes is so short, so I just wanted to focus on some facts. Masks were implemented at the beginning of last year to, number 1, make sure hospitals were not overrun, and number 2, to protect the elderly and the vulnerable. We are now into this over a year. Our hospitals are at the lowest number they've ever been since this started. We have 3 vaccines, and every adult 16 years and older who wants the vaccine has had ample opportunity to get it. Masks have been optional in the community for over a month, and our spread has remained well under 5%. Public schools have lost nearly 50,000 students in the state of Arizona over their handling of COVID. Gilbert Public Schools have just announced that they're laying off hundreds of teachers due to low enrollment. Is this what we want for Higley? Charter schools have gained over 18,000 of those students and are on wait lists. All of the charters in the area, along with Queen Creek and Combs, have made masks optional. Listen, I am all for those who want to wear masks being able to wear them. I would stand shoulder to shoulder with them any day of the week and fight for their right to do so. Unfortunately, that feeling does not seem mutual. They have told me to sit down and shut up and put my mask on myself and my children. This is not how a community functions. We do not mask 4-, 5-, and 6-year-old children because we as adults can't make common sense decisions. COVID is here to stay. It will be a seasonal virus that mutates every year just like the flu. We had better learn to live with it because we certainly can't hide from it. Here's the bottom line. It does not have to be us against them. You can deal with this in the best interest of everyone involved. You swore to govern in the best interest of all Higley students. Now, let's stand up and do the right thing for everyone and make masks optional for all Higley families.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Chris Gilligan.
Madam President, members of the governing board, Dr. Foley, and members of the cabinet. My attendance at the governing board meeting on April 21st, I observed the board enter the chamber masked, unmasked to speak, masked back up to come to the floor for pictures and to hug and congratulate award recipients, return to their seats and unmask again. If the surgical and cloth masks worn by the board during that meeting were effective, what effect does the board think they had on their efficacy through the repeated removal of and then remasking? Do you think you compromised the efficacy of your face covering through these practices? Do you think that your students age 5 to 18 do a better job of not compromising the efficacy of their face covering each school day? What are we doing? I also observed cabinet members periodically wearing and not wearing their mask, with some cabinet members wearing over the mouth and below the nose. What are we doing? I'm talking about adults during a meeting in which the duration was 2.5 hours. Am I to assume the board, Dr. Foley, and the cabinet wear their face covering for 7 hours or more each school day? The same of what is required of Higley's students to do? Are you? I observed cabinet members struggle to remain awake and alert, no doubt due in part to their dysregular CO2 and O2 levels, breathing in their own carbon dioxide. How do you think my children with asthma, anxiety, and autism are doing by enduring the same day in, day out for 7+ hours? What are we doing? I realize that with face coverings, you have those that are for and those that are against. Convincing the other party to change their mind is extremely difficult. The only way is through education. As educators, perhaps you can answer the following questions. What are the long-term effects on mask wearers, such as headaches arising from impeded breathing? Do the masks shed fibers or substances that are harmful when inhaled? Supporting continued face covering policy without knowing the answers to these questions is irresponsible. As educators, will you apply critical thinking to your decision, or will you be complacent? The proposed update to the current policy of not requiring students to wear face coverings at school bus stops and changing physical distance from 6 feet to 3 feet is not enough. It's lazy. It reeks of fear for taking a real stand and creating a warranted positive change now. Unacceptable. Doing the minimum is not a high bar. End the fear. End the current face covering policy. It's not too late to walk back the proposed update. Discuss during your executive session and make the change that is in the best interest of Higley Unified School District parents, teachers, staff, and students. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next speaker, Anna Van Hoek.
Hello. My name is Anna Van Hoek. I'm a medical freedom and parental rights advocate. I am also the Vice President of Children's Health Defense Arizona chapter. I have lived in this district for 15 years. My oldest went to Higley School District for 9 years. I ended up pulling my children from Higley in August after the district violated their own mask policy at the time and refused my children a mask exemption when they were aware of their medical conditions and my oldest had an IEP. My children were moved to a school district that allowed them a mask exemption, and they have been in school since August 17th without masks and without ever being sick. Even though my kids no longer attend Higley School District, I still fought the district. I will continue to fight for other people's children to be free of these bacteria-filled cloths. The metrics initially said that the mask would be removed when it reached a certain number of cases, and then the Department of Health decided to secretly change those metrics and keep the masks on children for good. Every mask specifically states that they do not prevent the transmission of viruses. You were quick to implement the masks when the governor said to do so, but now that he removed the mandates, games are being played. Our children are not to be toyed with. Enough is enough. Schools can create rules as long as they do not supersede existing state statutes, and the Arizona Parental Bill of Rights is an existing statute which needs to be upheld. There is no current law or executive order that requires children to be in masks. Therefore, by denying parental rights to choose is a violation of the law. Per ARS 1-601, the liberty of parents to direct the upbringing, education, healthcare, and mental health of their children is a fundamental right. ARS 1-602, all parental rights are reserved to a parent of a minor child without obstruction or interference from this state, any political subdivision of the state, any other government entity, and any other institution, including the right to direct the education of a minor, the right to direct the upbringing of a minor, the right to make healthcare decisions for a minor. This includes a medical device such as a mask. The right to consent in writing before a biometric scan of a minor is taken, such as a temperature check. The numbers are obvious, and so is the science. There is currently no pandemic, and kids were never impacted. Even the safely return to in-person instruction clearly states the state of Arizona does not make any express or implied warranties regarding the face covering. The state won't even accept what they're putting out there. The only reason the emergency order is not ending is because the vaccine is only approved for emergency use, and it cannot be administered if that emergency order is over. You need to think about the emotional and mental well-being. These kids play together, have sleepovers, and even play sports together outside of school. They then are forced to keep their distance and mask up when they're in school with the same kids. It's absurd and lacks common sense. Far more kids have committed suicide and OD'd than have been impacted by COVID. It is beyond time to stop playing politics and get these rags off of our children's faces. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and our last speaker, Kevin Jacobs.
I have to say this is a difficult topic, and I'm very happy that I'm not in your seats because it's been a tough discussion today, and there's been a lot of emotion both ways, and it's not easy. So we've heard a lot of talk about the kids who can choose to stay home. We've done that with our children. Our children have been at home since the beginning. We're really lucky that my wife's a stay-at-home mom, so she's been able to do that. I have a 4-year-old that I would love to have over at Cooley in the preschool, but we haven't felt safe doing that, even with the masks. My wife's health compromised, and we've had family that's passed away from it, unfortunately, and other friends who've been long-term illnesses. It's not an easy decision. You're going to have to decide what's best for our kids, and we appreciate it, whichever it is. We're hoping to bring our kids back to school. Whichever way that goes, if we keep the masks and they still have the option to do that, then at least they can wear the mask and they can be protected. And I'm sorry for how difficult this has been. It's been hard for our kids as well. This last quarter has been really hard for those who stayed at home. We have not had the support that we had the first 3 quarters. The number of kids that are staying home is getting smaller, and it's getting harder. As we look at whether it's right to be wearing masks or not, there's some other similar items that have limited our freedoms. And as I talk about masks, my 4-year-old loves his mask. Like, we get out and go to the store, and as we're starting to loosen up and say, like, there might be cases where we don't have to wear a mask outside, or other spots where the science is supporting it, he's hesitant. he takes that mask as a safety. And so he shows that even the small kids can do it. But we don't allow people to drive drunk in the U.S. We feel like that we take that freedom away from you. That saves about 10,000 lives a year in the entire U.S. We force people to wear a seatbelt. That only saves about 15,000 lives a year. And we force kids to sit in these tight, restrictive child seats. And if you don't sit in one, your child can be taken away from you. And again, it doesn't save more than 10,000 lives a year. So as we make this decision of whether we feel like it's time yet, and I know it's a hard one, we just ask you to think about those of us who are I think the minority in this case, but are still trying to be safe for the last few weeks as we stay there. And thank you for this time.
Thank you. All right. Now our last speaker, Andrea Fortenberry.
Thank you, Board. Sorry for the disruption. I had signed up online. I don't know how my form didn't come through. But I am here today to ask you to please make the mask mandate optional, or to make masks optional at all Higley schools effective immediately. And I would like to say that as parents of 2 children in Higley, I have been very thankful for the leadership of our district. I was very grateful that last spring we got an email that said that masks would be optional going into the next school year. But then the county and the governor came down with the executive orders requiring masks at schools. And our 2 children who thrive in school had a very hard time in virtual schooling, and so we decided that the best move would be for them to attend in-person schooling. And we are very grateful that our district gave parents the choice of in-person schooling or virtual schooling for their children. I feel that we have all been very patient with this mask policy, but with the governor ending the executive order requiring masks at K-12 public schools, I believe the time for change is now. Every family should have the right to choose whether their children wear masks at school, just as parents were given the choice as to whether their children would attend in-person or virtual schooling. Removing the mask requirement really is a win-win solution for everyone. Those parents who want their children to continue masking at school are able to do so, and those of us who wish for our children to not wear masks at school would have that option as well. It is hard to believe that children who are primarily not affected by this virus have had to wear masks at school for 8 months now. Our children who are generally healthy have complained of headaches, anxiety, and overall discomfort from wearing a mask for 7 hours a day. And as a mom, I have guilt and anxiety for requiring them to be at school in a mask for 7 hours a day. Now that we all know more than we knew back a year ago about this virus, I believe that it is cruel for us to continue requiring them to wear masks for 7 hours a day, to learn, to be in PE, to play sports, and to play together outside on the playground. I ask that you please consider the mental health and well-being, the social well-being of our children. Please consider that although we only have 22 days of school left, that means more than 150 additional hours that our children would be required to be in masks at school all day. I do not believe that we should be forced to put our children through those 150 hours of masking if we, as their parents, do not feel it is in their best interest for us to do so. I ask that you would please put our children first and move our district to a mask optional policy and put the choice back into the hands of parents. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you for everyone taking the time to come speak and share your thoughts with us. We appreciate that, as well as the countless number of emails we've received. So thank you. With that, we're going to go on to our next agenda item, which is 5.1. It's an informational item for face covering recommendation for the remainder of the 2020-2021 school year. Dr. Foley.
President Reese, members of the board, it was a week ago today that the whole conversation of masks has consumed good waking hours of all of our administrative team. So tonight I'd like to bring to you the conversations and the information that comprise our mitigation plan that we have worked with our entire admin team, and that includes all of our general administrators who are principals, directors in this district, for feedback as we look at how do we navigate moving forward from now to the end of the year and then beyond. Next slide. So obviously, the impetus for our conversation tonight is, as many of our speakers tonight eloquently captured, we have been under an executive order. The mask requirement, but we had two mask requirements that required us to have that. It was an essential part of our mitigation plan and has been, as far as, because our mitigation plan also dictated to us how and what we did to communicate when we had positive cases on campus, who was primary, who was secondary, when did we quarantine, what did the cleaning protocols look like. So when we talk about mitigation plans, it's far more than just the wearing of the face masks. Obviously, next slide. When the governor last week unhinged that, it causes us to look at this a little bit differently. One of the things that was very clear in his communication is that legally there was not an executive order that held it. Now, the issue is you still had governing board policy that we are governed by that was initially in place because we were required to have it. One of the interesting things, and we've been all week in conversation with administrators and superintendents across the state and with our own attorneys, we've been getting on the day legal guidance and updates. What does this mean? Now, what about these questions? One of the things that has come through this is, because there's the part in there that we have policies that legally we're allowed to continue to have them if we so choose to implement them. Our attorneys have informed us that we are not violating, even though there are other things in place, we have the right to put a mask policy in place. But there, again, is the fact that we no longer legally have to have one in place. So, next slide. Obviously, though you don't have to have a mask in place, but your mitigation strategies, obviously, we're still navigating through, as again, many of our speakers eloquently said tonight, we're still navigating and we'll continue to navigate through. At our last meeting, we talked about one of our strategic initiatives is how are we going to begin the school year safely and evolve from this? Obviously, social emotional being a huge part of what's very, very important for us. So all of us are very, very aware of this. We have received hundreds of emails. We have read, we've gotten emails, we've gotten things through social media, we've gotten some of us to us directly, some through public relations, and we have thoroughly read all of them. We've heard from parents, we've heard from employees, we've heard from students who have very, very, very diverse opinions. We've heard many of them tonight. The social emotional want to see faces, want to see emotion, want our faces free, and have very clearly said that. Then we have heard from many saying, I agreed to come back with these understandings. We have employees who are saying, I agreed to these mitigation strategies. I have very, very much do not want the rules to be changed. We have heard passionately from both sides. So we are once again in a position where ultimately whatever we decide to do, there will be those who are unhappy with whatever is decided. And so we're trying to navigate through the multiple factors here which have led to our recommendation tonight. So one of the things that we do and that we've done well, I think, in Higley is that we don't operate in a vacuum. We work with our entire team, just like we did this summer with our task force, where we have our principals and our assistant principals and teachers and different representation on the group. We did the same thing here quickly, too. First thing Tuesday morning, we had late Monday night last week, we were getting everyone on the phone saying, need these people in the room, get a pulse check, find out this information. We need more information on this. Tuesday morning, we start working through what are the issues you're hearing, what are the concerns from our sites, what are our issues with our employees, what are their concerns if we were to do this, if we were to do that. Principals, what are you thinking? Directors, issues, what are your concerns? And hearing from them. Obviously, when you look at our administrative team, we're all over the place with our own thoughts and feelings about this very thing as well. So again, there's much diversity amongst even those of us who've worked all through this process. We've talked with our employees. Once we got a plan in place, we also shared this with representation of Higley's Education Association. Beat it up. What are our issues? What are our concerns? What are the thoughts? And obviously, we have reviewed and considered several ideas. Every day, we have been part of talking through, so what, now what? Okay? And so again, we bring to you that the challenge is that there isn't a one answer that will make everyone happy. But right now, what we're proposing to you is considering multiple factors in our mitigation plan and going back to these filters. We first saw these when we were putting together our mitigation plan this summer and going into this next year, understanding that, yep, health and safety is important. What that looks like and how we address it this year will be important. What we do with instruction is huge, and wanting to make sure that that becomes a focus for us no matter what, that we're respecting of and accepting diverse opinions, that we're not all going to agree. And then again, ongoing communication and communicating quickly and timely with people as soon as decisions are made so that they are able to respond for themselves to the best of their ability. So tonight, our recommendation that we're bringing to you has two parts. Again, multiple considerations in this, and a lot of these are tightly connected with the fact that we are still, while we are not unhinged from a mask ordinance, we are still in concert with when there are positive cases in the classroom, and we have positive cases that continue to happen. We are thrilled that we have fewer than we had. But again, tomorrow morning, as you see every day, you get the daily updates. We currently today have 5 who will hit the dashboard tomorrow. And again, we've had days with 0. And the great news is we're trending in the right direction. And then we also have days where we're trending up. So we have to continue to focus on whatever we do, how will we handle what happens in classrooms when there are positive cases. So our recommendation has 2 parts. The first thing that we were looking at is your face covering policy. We looked at multiple things. The parts that are in red would have been what we would have modified or added in. The things that we struck were things that we would remove out, and this is the exact policy. This is 2 sections. There's obviously a much larger policy, but these were the only 2 spaces that would require modifications. That would be the face covering should be worn individually indoors. And then it would be, we would remove bus stops, being that that is outside, and that we would add a component that face covering shall be recommended for outdoor activities and events on district property, where physical distancing is more possible, where you're outside, again, and also as heat begins to continue to rise. These are a lot of things that are connected with some of the guidance that is part of CDC that is actually getting ready to forthcome, loosening up outdoor restrictions with masks. The other piece was updating in that policy from in alignment with the CDC recommendation of from 6 to 3 were the 2 pieces that we would amend in that policy. So why would we amend rather than just immediately suspend? And this consumed an awful lot of our conversation and discussion with our administration. And I'm going to ask also for Jillian to share from the Arizona Department of Health Services guidance with us at this time too. So one of the things we're looking at is at this moment we have 22 days left of this school year starting tomorrow. This year has felt like it has flown by and has felt like 100 years, all the same. We have students and families who entered into instructional models and with their current employment contracts with the understanding that we would follow certain mitigation strategies. We'll talk with you here in a minute, but if we immediately suspend our mask policy, we go from our definitions of primary and secondary to just plain exposure. And it just changes our communication structures and who, when, and how we have to quarantine, which we'll give examples here in just a minute. We did have a lot of families who returned to us from spring break with the idea that we would be following this mitigation. And we have heard from a lot of those families. If we hold this, it allows us to keep our current mitigation and communication protocols in place with primary and secondary exposure. And again, this one also aligns with outdoor recommendations that are connected with CDC guidance with, again, more space. And again, would allow us for outdoor activities or events, for instance, such as graduation, to be where there would be an optional or highly recommended. But I'm going to ask Mrs. Fulton to share for just a little bit about the health Arizona Department of Health Services feedback and guidance to us that also had a large part in our recommendation to you this evening on the amending portion.
President Reese, members of the board, I'm here this evening. I want to give you health background information related to our recommendation. The Health Department is not changing their guidance as of the webinar with the Maricopa County Department of Public Health on Thursday, April 22nd. Nothing has changed with face covering guidelines or contact tracing, and they have no plans to change anything in that regard. They do have a lot of concerns, and they do not agree with face coverings going optional right now. Why we would suggest that we wait until next year. We have spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours combined putting our mitigation plan in place, including the communication and implementation of it. If we move to face covering optional now, we move completely away from our communication and protocols that have proven effective and our community is accustomed to expecting. This will be a shift from primary and secondary exposure to everyone has exposure. The current primary and secondary exposure protocol, in alignment with the Health Department, our current HUSD mitigation plan has outlined primary and secondary exposure. These definitions drove our mitigation plan, our communication protocols, and consequently our potential quarantine guidance. For example, today I had, as Dr. Foley told you, 5 cases, and we had a scenario where there was a very high probability that I was quarantining an entire class. Because everybody in that class had their masks on, I did not need to do that. That definitely would have been a snowball effect, because when we're looking at the contact tracing with the health department, the way most classes are set up and kids are going to different parts of the school, whether it's specials in an elementary level or if it's different class schedules at secondary, the way they combine and the way that they're moving around, it would have snowballed into quarantining many more classes over the next few days, full classes of students. When we went back to in-person learning options in September, we gave our community an expectation and outlined what our year would look like. Waiting to go face covering optional gives our community a common expectation of our year ahead and allows current mitigation plan and communication protocols to stay intact. We do not want to change the rules as students, families, and employees entered this instructional model and their current employment contracts with the understanding we would follow our mitigation strategies through the end of the 2020-21 school year. We will then begin summer and fall with new updated plans that can be communicated prior to their start. Why we are recommending the modification of the policy. Our recommendation aligns with the Health Department's current recommendations of exposure. While students are inside, they could be sitting next to a potential case for longer than 10 to 15 minutes. Students that are outside at recess or PE have a much lower risk of potential exposure due to the amount of time they are around each other. Students outside for recess, PE, or other educational opportunities with their face coverings off or moving and playing are not considered a high risk of exposure because of the potential for social distancing. Exposure protocol when we go to face covering optional. When we move to face covering being optional, the primary and secondary exposure distinction goes away. If there is a positive case in a classroom, everyone in the classroom will be notified of potential exposure. It will then be a case-by-case basis with the health department's recommendation. We may need to quarantine an entire classroom, even if they are wearing face coverings, depending on the number of cases in a class. The risk of quarantine could happen at any point, and that risk will likely be higher when face coverings are optional. That's it. Sorry, I was waiting for you.
Next slide. So with additional information, one of the things that we would recommend then is that we would keep this effect, that this policy, or our suggestion would be to amend this policy that would basically, beginning effective immediately tomorrow, we would hold indoor masks in place until the 31st, but would make outdoor utilization of face coverings optional until the 31st. The second part of this, if you would, next slide, would be effective immediately then June 1st. That you would suspend the wearing of this as a requirement, but make this an optional for families. That way, those who are choosing to teach or those who are choosing to attend summer school are understanding what we're agreeing into. The mitigation would then, obviously, our mitigation plan will change, our communication protocols and structures will change. We'll have to have a mitigation plan for next year, but it would look different because we would be wearing optional face coverings. Any questions?
Dr. Foley, can you just explain, we heard from someone tonight that said, carefully about suspending the June 1st face mask policy. Can you talk a little bit, I believe when it was discussed that there's less kids in the class. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how that discussion went?
Yes, President Reese, members of the board, one of the things that we think would be kind of nice is to have summer school as an opportunity to test run our new mitigation with mask optional. Obviously, summer school has smaller numbers, we'll have smaller number of students, we'll be able to do, again, we can update our communication structures and protocols. People will be entering into this with understanding. The other thing is too, is we can also monitor this. I think what will be important is that again, if there were any changes in our numbers or the number of cases, or we had to quarantine large groups of classrooms, we may be looking at then having a conversation about what we've learned in this process. And again, would need to probably come with our guidance and recommendations based on this. At this point, we would be saying that we would like to communicate with people that this would be optional with the information that we have at this time. And obviously, the summer school would allow us to see how that plan was implemented. We have already started. We've already started the updating of the mitigation plan for next year and the communication structures, what the letters would look like, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and we still have positive cases in the classroom, and we'll need to be able to communicate with families, and what are we communicating with families, and what do those communication structures look like?
President Reese, I apologize for not getting this to you sooner, but my question is, for those that would be wearing a mask, if they chose to wear a mask, if it was optional indoors, if they were wearing it, would they have to be quarantined, or would they have to be quarantined? Is that my understanding, no matter what, even if?
President Reese, Member Schultz, yes, and it would depend on the number of cases in the classroom. So, and here's how this works. Is currently the health department understands that if we have people who are, if we have everyone who's wearing a mask, the assumption is everyone is wearing a mask. If there are more, for instance, AIA had different guidance into this, and I may have Jillian help me answer this. AIA had different guidance. We have had to quarantine when we had teams who had multiple number of kids who tested positive, who had expansive amounts of time in which they were not wearing masks. Now, this is a classroom situation in which if they had not been wearing masks, if they had not been wearing masks, we would have had to have quarantined. Now, if I have going into next year, if I have students who choose to be optional, and I choose to wear a mask, right, and there are multiple kids in a class who end up getting COVID, that's what they're considering an outbreak. And then because there had been the extent of exposure, depending upon the number of kids in the class, depending upon the number of people who ended up getting it, we may end up having to, we'd be able to be directed to quarantine anyhow. And it would be on a case-by-case basis. Again, you also know this year we had examples where we have special education classrooms, for example, where the students' conditions do not allow them to wear masks. And when there were outbreaks in those classes, we had to quarantine. In this case, if we had a certain number, even if we had been wearing masks, there was the high risk, high transmission, we would end up needing to quarantine.
President Reese.
Mrs. Wilson?
Do we know how many kids are coming into our health offices with heat-related illness, I guess I would call it, not feeling well, headache, whatever, because of the heat? That we've determined heat, not COVID, because I heard that a lot. It was an underlying theme in the emails that they're hot and that they're, getting sick from being so hot. Thank you.
President Reese, Vice President Wilson, that was a question that you were curious about, and I'll ask Mrs. Fulton to follow up because she has conversation with the health department, our health aides. Thank you.
Thank you. President Reese, Vice President Wilson, I surveyed our health offices with that, and I started looking at all of our data in the system. We have not had any students come in with any heat-related or, wearing their masks from that.
I think, if you don't mind if I can speak,
Mrs. Anderson?
from the murmur from the crowd as a teacher, I can say that I have had students in my class many times who say, I have a headache, I don't feel good. I say, go to the nurse. They say, no, they're going to send me home. So I am curious about the numbers in this case. I'm not saying it's not real. I'm just saying I have personally experienced students refuse to go to the nurse, many students.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, no.
It's not factual.
I'm sorry. I can't have you continue to speak. We had our public comment. Thank you. All right, do you have any other questions before we move on to our next item? Okay.
I just have a quick statement, Mrs. Reese, if that's okay.
Mrs. Wilson.
When I was thinking about this highly debated topic, I started looking back at my notes from August 2020 when we were deciding if and when to go back to in-person instruction. I gave a small speech then, and I want to echo some of the words that maybe have a little meaning today. We have divided our community once again. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Whatever is the right decision for your family, make it. It's the right decision. Don't judge others from their decisions. You don't know what they're dealing with. Safe means different to every family and each person. Some feel safe, others do not. It's okay. Please continue to be kind and show your kids that kindness matters. These are the words I spoke 8 months ago, and I continue to speak them today. I've read every email. I would encourage everyone to look at and empathize with your opposing view. It doesn't mean that your viewpoint will change, but give some empathy to your neighbor, the teacher, or the friend that maybe has a different view than you. That's all I need to say today.
Thank you. All right, then we'll move on to 6.1. I move that we amend our policy EDB, pandemic emergencies, with the recommendation that face covering policy is amended to indicate face covering shall be worn at all times while individuals are indoors on district property or at a school function. Face coverings will be recommended for outdoor activities and events on district property. This policy also amends the change to the physical distance separation of at least 6 feet to 3 feet between individuals.
I'd like to make an amendment to the motion.
We need a second first.
I'd second that. And then I'd like to make an amendment to the motion. I'd like to make an amendment to the motion that we make face masks optional effective tomorrow.
I second that. And can I make a comment?
Yes, Mrs. Anderson.
Good evening. You're all eager to get to the vote, so I will keep this to the point. My decision is based on 3 factors: consistency, student experiences, and my experience as a current high school educator. First, consistency. District policy and procedure have not been consistently followed on HUSD campuses since January and even prior to January. I've received photos and videos of students not wearing masks, sharing food from the same bag with multiple students, and that means many hands grabbing food, touching a mouth, and hands returning to the bag, masks not worn over their mouth and nose. And please understand, this is not my attempt to ridicule the teacher or administration, and I want to point out, because I have trouble keeping track of masks in my classroom, and I allow students to eat and drink in my classroom. My point is that our students have already been close to other students on and off campus without masks. That's my consistency point. Also, with consistency. Schools within our district and neighboring our district, Legacy, Queen Creek Unified School District, Mesa, which is potentially phasing to mask optional, ALA, and EVIT. We have families with children that exercise school choice within their household and have different children attend different schools within that household. And we also have students that attend our high school campuses and the EVIT campus, so they're going back and forth. Also with consistency, all of the athletic leagues outside of the AIA regulations playing in city and neighborhood parks that I have observed every weekend, because I got to drive my kid over the weekend places, at minimum for months, consists of K-12 age children not wearing a mask while playing. Coaches aren't wearing a mask, and attendees are not wearing a mask. Again, I am not stating this to ridicule these people. I am pointing out the inconsistencies in mask wearing for school-age children and their family members that have been going on since January. I'm aware that their interactions are outdoors, but children are in close proximity, touching, breathing rapidly, and excessively excreting particles from their mouth and nose at higher rates. Children have been exposed due to mask inconsistency for months. Also with mask inconsistencies, mask wearing hasn't been consistent after school hours as children gather in friend and social groups without masks. I've witnessed this since the summer of 2020. Families may have reduced travel and attendance to private events and family gatherings, but they have continued since 2020, and masks have not been worn consistently during those times. Also, looking at our March and April numbers after spring break, when travel and social gatherings occurred with mask inconsistencies, our numbers are low, and that's after families were very close together and traveling. The second factor, student experience. Students are noticeably less social, quieter, and some completely unhappy with masks on at school. Students exhibit sadness, physical suffering, difficulty breathing, uncomfortableness, and cannot focus because of the distractions created by masks. Hot, itchy, claustrophobic, debilitating. The word miserable has been used countless times in my classroom. Students have complained of acne, headaches, migraines, stomach aches, exasperated systems for panic and sensory disorders, depression, suicidal thoughts, and speech delays. In the school district I teach in, since the masks have been removed, there's kids that they're new kids. Sorry. They're participating in my class like I haven't seen before. It's pretty fascinating. I didn't expect it. I really didn't. I just thought 90% of my students aren't wearing masks right now. It's fascinating. I'm sorry, it's embarrassing. Also, some students don't mind wearing a mask, but 93% of my students are currently choosing to not wear a mask in my classroom. Without masks on, students have been happier and more productive. Students that sat slumped in their seats and hardly participated in class discussion are completing their assignments, and they're brand new students. There's mention of fear of bullying. Those that would choose to still wear masks, I have not witnessed such behavior at all. Queen Creek's got good kids, I guess. I don't know, but I don't believe it's happening. I'm not saying it wouldn't, but I'm not seeing it. The day back, I walked up and spoke to every single one of my students that wore a mask, and I said, if you want me to wear a mask, I'll wear a mask. If you want, wherever you want to sit in the room, it's your seat. I had students sitting next to them say, yes, do you want me to wear a mask? Awesome, thank you, and it was appreciated. And some students that wear a mask said, you know, it's your choice. I choose to wear a mask and you choose not to wear a mask, you choose. It's the most adult thing I've heard high school students say. I also want to just point out that some younger students have to wear masks much longer than others because they wear it during school, then they have to go to after-school care. Those hours get long, those days get very long. And I'd like to close with that third factor of my experience. So in addition to my experiences and observations already stated, I'm currently choosing to teach without a mask in the Queen Creek Unified School District. I would be a hypocrite to choose to not wear a mask and then make others wear them. Thank you.
President Reese,
Thank you.
can I just say one? I just want to make one comment. I made the motion to have it effective immediately, but I still respect everybody's decision to wear a mask. And I understand there are many families who are not comfortable. And I want to give that choice to everyone. But I do see, for a lot of the reasons that Mrs. Anderson mentioned, that masks aren't being worn properly. And my kids pick their masks up off the back of the car or off the ground and the germs that they're getting on their face. So I don't see them being worn effectively. But if your family chooses to wear a mask, I respect your decision and my children and my family, and I hope everybody in the community continues to respect each other should this vote pass.
President Reese.
Mrs. Kaler.
Thank you, Mrs. Anderson, for those eloquent words tonight. I did not write a speech. Maybe I should have. I've struggled this week, I'll be very honest. Last year was so difficult as a board member, and I thought, we're kind of in the clear. And then Ducey comes out with this beautiful, lovely announcement a month before school's over. And it's really had me, I'll be honest, struggling, because no matter what I vote tonight, I'm a no-win situation. And that is a really terrible place to be honest, because I am a people pleaser and I want people to be happy, and it's not going to be that way tonight, no matter what we do. And we went through this last year, and I'm so proud of Higley and the decisions we made at the time we made them. I remember in December, Dr. Foley, it's like, do we have a meeting? Do we close our schools for 2? And you kind of had to hold me back because I wasn't sure what the right decision was back then even. And now I know we made the right decision by staying open and keeping those kids in school. Thank you, really, no applause necessary. This is not a glorious job by any means. One of my struggles this past spring was spring break. I'll be very honest. I was seeing pictures blatantly thrown in my face from people who were adamant about not being able to work or go shopping or go anywhere. But then I saw their pictures on beautiful places across our country and even out of our country. And I really struggled with that, I'll be very honest, because I felt like that was a slap in my face as a board member where I was being told one thing and actions showed something different. And I'm not calling out anybody particularly. It was parents, it was teachers, it was across the board hypocrisy in many, many ways. I appreciate your motion tonight. I've struggled. I've looked at this so many times and I thought, okay, do I amend another motion and say something like, well, maybe, can we meet in the middle, 2 more weeks? I want to end Higley on a high note. I'll tell you that right now. I think everybody needs a high note in Higley this year. And if that's taking these masks off these kids and letting these teachers see their faces for the first time and having that, again, it is such a choice now, and it's a choice everywhere we go. You can go to Costco with a mask or without a mask. Target, everywhere we go, there's choices now. Yes, there are a few companies that are saying, no, you have to wear a mask or you can't come in. Or Trader Joe's, I love Trader Joe's, one person in the store at a time can be on without a mask, which I think is just silly. But that's, again, we've been sitting up here and we're being told, make your decisions on science. Well, I get science every day sent to me where one day it's masks work and you better wear them, and the next day another study comes out and says they don't work. Wear 2. Okay, now we wear 2 masks. I emotionally cannot keep up with what's going on in the world today. And I don't think any of us up here ever expected to be sitting in this seat once again, making a decision, and it's going to be a no-win situation. But in my humblest of humble opinions, I believe our children need to end Higley on a high note, and they need to be free. And so, and I know there's people going to be upset with me for that choice of my my views, and that's okay. Keeping a mask on, if that's what you need to do, then you need to do that. And you need to instill that in your child. If that's your family's position, I applaud you, and I'm here to support you. Even my own children, I'm guessing no matter what vote is tonight, will go to school with a mask on tomorrow, my own children. So even in my own house, it's divided, and it's been not fun to have those conversations with my adult children. So anyhow, it's kind of where I'm at tonight.
President Reese.
Mrs.
We're open for questions, correct? That we can, okay, I just wanted to make sure. Dr. Foley, how would this be communicated since there's an amendment and there's maybe a little curveball thrown at you today? I just wanted to know, how is this going to be perceived out if this vote were to pass? I'm not saying it will. I don't know. I can't obviously poll, but I just think that we should have all the answers before we have to make a vote. Thank you.
President Reese, Vice President Wilson, your cabinet team has been prepared with whatever outcome would come of tonight. Obviously, what we had to provide for you tonight was a recommendation from your administrative team based upon our protocols and our expectations, but we also have been working very hard. So we have multiple sets of communications and plans ready to go. Depending upon how the outcome of this vote goes tonight, we will send immediate communication to the families. We have literally 2 versions of communication, and between any amendment you're going to make, we're going to make those changes. So we will be here late tonight whenever it takes to finalize whatever is decided will be communicated. We'll then follow up with our administration so that we are able to begin implementing. It will require us to make some communication changes, but we can make that happen. And so regardless of how this goes tonight, we're ready to implement and put in place execute your decision.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone's had a lot of great conversation, just the same as everyone who came to speak for either for or against. I do have to say that while this is a very personal choice for individual families, I want to thank everybody. It was not nearly as emotionally charged as the decision to return, whether we go in person or not. So I want to thank everyone for the emails that we got, with the exception of a few. And maybe I'll just say those were very direct, but it was a much different tone than it was when we returned. And like Mrs. Keller said, I don't think any of us expected to be, again, placed in an absolute no-win situation. Yes, this is what we were elected for. Yes, these are the decisions that we need to make, and this is our job. But as everybody knows, in all aspects, COVID has thrown a complete and utter wrench in what we do. We have to make tough decisions, but again, this one is very, very divided, and we continue to have a divided community. Like you said, it doesn't have to be an us against them, but it has been for almost a year now since COVID started, and there's many factors for that. So I know it's been said, everyone needs to respect everyone's decision, and whatever the outcome of tonight's vote is. And it has been difficult when you read an email and you hear about the struggles and, take our masks off, and you're like, oh my gosh, yes. I mean, it's like, I have 3 kiddos at home too, and it's like, oh, okay, how many times walking out the door, do you have your mask? Nope. Okay, go in and get it. We're driving down the street to go drop them off. Oh, I forgot my mask. And so you read the family situations, you understand with your own kiddos, it's like, oh, wouldn't it be so nice? And then you read another email and it talks about people who chose to do in-person school because we have these mitigation strategies, and the face coverings were part of that strategy. And they talk about their situation, and you're like, oh my gosh, yes, we're almost done. Let's just make it through it. And literally, you're going back and forth and within your own within minutes of each other when you look at it, because you can see both sides of it. You can feel for each person that you're reading their comments from. So it has been a difficult decision, and it has, I appreciate the time that our staff and cabinet have put into what they feel is the best option for our schools. We have kids in close quarters. We have lots of kids in classes. If we're having to quarantine entire classrooms, we have, from a high school level, AP tests coming up. What does that look like if their class is quarantined or if they're quarantined and they have to do it online? We have finals coming up. We have graduation coming up. And we've finally been able to move a little bit and get some events happening, and what's going to happen if we start having an outbreak and these events get canceled. And so you think about it from that side as well. So there is a lot, and I appreciate everyone who's taken the time, and we've purposely taken this time to be able to gather information to ensure what the health department was going to do, what it would look like on both sides. So I definitely appreciate the countless hours and the time that everyone has spent putting that time in.
President Reese?
Mrs. Kaler?
When you talked about the emails, yeah, some are, quite inappropriate, but one really touched me today that it was an email from a sweet mama over at Cortina, and she actually gave us a picture of her son's mask at the end of the day, and I have not witnessed something that gross in a while, to be very honest. And I have adult children, so my perspective is a little bit different. They work, and they're expected to wear a mask at work still, and so they're a little more careful. They actually ask me to wash them all the time. But when I saw that little kiddo's mask, I thought, this isn't good for him. This is not helping him today. And it really touched my heart in a way that I hadn't read an email before like that. So, and it was really kind to the way she wrote it. So I was very, very touched by that email, and other emails not so touched by.
I do appreciate all the emails. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't say that how many we got. There were pages and scrolling on my phone to the point where I had to do just 3 times a day checking. That's it. And I would read groups of them because that's all I could handle. But like President Reese said, you would get one and it would be just so moving one way. And then honestly, the next email, it was back and forth. And it's, I think, a divide. And I think whichever way this decision goes, I want to just echo those words that I said earlier. Come alongside those friends that might not be on the same side as you of this vote and tell them it's going to be okay and you'll do what you need to do. Because, man, I feel for them. Either way.
Our campaign slogan of be kind. Let's be kind. This last month of school, more than ever, let's be kind.
Okay, any other questions or comments on the amended motion? So at this moment, what we are voting on is Mrs. Schultz's amended motion of to make face masks optional effective tomorrow. So all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay. All right, that motion carries 4-1. Then we will go on to the we will go on to 6.2.
Second. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, read it. I'm sorry. I got too excited.
You were all ready for it. So I move that we
We don't need to do that.
Well, we have to, we have to suspend the policy at some point.
Does this one need to
give me
even
just
have
a moment as
motion?
because it was.
President Reese, members of the board, that was part 2. So I think that there's no need to suspend what you didn't amend. So therefore, you have suspended in your amended motion that passed, you have suspended. So
there is no need for 6.2 because the
Correct.
policy is already suspended based on the previous amended motion. All right. Thank you for not seconding me. All right, with that, I move that we adjourn.
Second there.
All in favor?
Aye.
Have a good evening. Thank you for your time.
I went back and forth all day, every day. So.